Well, today I have the opportunity to give a Bible study. I want to thank Marty Cobb for giving his interactive study, and I really enjoyed it. I actually was quite pleased with the audience, too. They're my friends in there, but they had a lot of details. They knew a lot of details of Marty Cobb's story. Marty Cobb told the story of the suffering that Jesus went through the night he was betrayed and then continuing on into the next day. And he gave a lot of great details, by the way. I took some notes on it. In fact, I was thinking, how could I get him up here to give some of that up here? Because I'm pretty spontaneous. But I guess I would just have to wait for him to speak this afternoon and then again tomorrow. But we have an opportunity today that we normally don't have. When we keep the days we keep days that picture meaning. Meaning, we're not in Jerusalem time. Our timing is not the exact same. But last night pictured the evening memorial about the suffering and death of the Lord. We've done that for a lot of years. Tomorrow pictures the first day of unleavened bread. So here we have the Saturday in between, and we get to do something we don't normally do. We realize, in fact, normally every memorial night, I mention to people, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, remember that's when Jesus died. That's when the Lamb of God died. But we don't normally get together during that time. We normally just think about it individually or maybe as a family. I suppose there are some people who have little Bible studies at that time. They have the freedom to do so. But we as a group don't do that. So those in the audience today and those listening in at this present time, in Central Standard Time, we're going to be approaching 3 o'clock. And that's the time he died. So in a sense, we get to continue on some of the great feeling of last night. Of course, the feeling of last night is twofold, is that I feel a certain amount of sorrow in that my sins contributed to his death, but I have a whole lot of happiness because he chose to die for me. And that's the mixture we have. We talked about that last night. That's the mixture. And quite frankly, our service last night is not as somber as many congregations have. And that's just because we, as much as we realize what he did for us, we also realize what he did for us. You see what I mean? We realize that we caused trouble for him, a lot of trouble for him, but he willingly took it on him, and he died for us. He suffered and died for us. So we get a chance to do it some more. So we don't normally meet as a group at this time of the death, at the time of the Son of God, but we are going to have a church service at 3 o'clock today. And so what I want to do is continue on the Bible study series I've been doing. Actually, Marty gave a lot of good details, and some of the others gave details that I really enjoyed in the story. Last Wednesday night, we talked about the symbols that were given on the night that the Son of God was betrayed. I'd hoped to get through all of Mark chapter 14. We didn't make it that far. We got pretty far. We got down to Mark 14, verse 44. And so today I want to finish up with that and then speed through and get through the parts of Mark chapter 15. But so we'll begin in Mark chapter 44, chapter 14, verse 43 is where we're going to pick up where we were from last Wednesday night. And again, I'd hoped to be done with this, but did not make it. So again, by the way, I really enjoyed what Marty said about the four Gospels. He talked about, again, gave a great analogy about how the four Gospels were written from slightly different perspectives. And if I remember, his analogy was, if you have 4 children and you ask 4 children about a certain event, they might vary a little bit on the details. I really like that because years ago, I used to think I had to make all those Gospels line up perfectly. I had to make those English words line up perfectly. And I did all sorts of gymnastics in my mind to try to make them last. If one said there were 2 angels and one said there was 1 angel, and one said the cock crowed 3 times and the other said, the different things, they slightly different. It used to drive me crazy. And by the way, it still drives some of my friends in the churches of God crazy because they're trying really hard to make it just match perfectly when the explanation that he gave, which I agree with, is that these are slightly different points of view. The main message is the same. The main meaning is the same, but they're slightly different. And I love the fact that that's part of the canon. I love that that's part of the canon. To me, that's a beautiful thing. And I don't have to do mental gymnastics to try to make every English word line up between the 4 Gospels. And I would hope you would not have to do that as well. Hopefully you could realize. But I've chosen Mark's account. And of course that means in choosing Mark's account, we're missing some of the other good pieces of information that were out there. Okay, going on to Mark chapter 14, I want to begin in verse 43. Again, this part we've already covered last night in symbolism. Then starting in chapter 15 is what we start now for today pictures. So chapter 43, I will go quickly. Immediately while he was still speaking, Judas of the 12, one of the 12, came with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. And his betrayer was there and gave him the kiss on the cheek, which was oftentimes called the holy kiss. But it was a way of identifying him, verse 44, that they could seize him and take him away. Which I think, what I like about this, I'd like to think that Judas wasn't fully convinced they were going to kill him. Maybe they were just going to take him away. Maybe he just got his money, that they were going to take him away and seize him. But I don't think he completely thought through what was going to happen. But verse 45, as soon as he came, he said, "Rabbi, Rabbi," and he gave him that kiss. Well, then they laid their hands on him and took him. And one of those who had a sword drew his sword and struck the servant's ear off. He wasn't trying to get the ear, he was trying to chop off his head. The soldier moved quickly enough that he only got the ear. And you know the story about how Christ repaired the ear. But he said to him, "Have you come out as a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you didn't seize me there." But this happened because that the scriptures could be fulfilled. Verse 50, they all forsook him. Not just Peter, not just the other apostle, John. They all forsook him. And this is a story about there was a certain young man, basically people think this is talking about Mark himself, who had a linen cloth thrown around his naked body. The young man laid hold of him and left the linen cloth and fled them from them naked. Verse 53 is the time when they led him away to the high priest, and they assembled the high priest together, the elders and the scribes. And in the interactive Bible study, it was well explained about how this was a judicial matter, trying to use the legal system to find him, to give him the death penalty, trying to use their alliances with political leaders, and they would try to use the different things to try to work any scam they could, any angle they could to get their desired result, which obviously is what happens today in our world today. A lot of people will use political systems. Every nation will do that, these political systems to get their desired result, very similar to what we have today. Well, then they were at this house, and they're warming by the fire. Verse 55, the chief priest and all the council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they couldn't find any. They couldn't find any facts. Now, many would bear witness against him, but their testimonies did not agree. So this was false accusations, false witnesses, trying to build a case, and they were having trouble building a case to prosecute him. But then there arose up and bore false witness against him, saying, "We've heard him say that I will destroy this temple made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another." And by the way, I have my article in Edifying the Body this week is talking about 3 days and 3 nights. This was a statement that he made back in John 2, early in his ministry, and this was thrown at him, and he was taunted with this later in his ministry, because that famous statement he made earlier, John 2, was thrown in his face in a couple different places, and they're throwing it in his face here. Well, finally, the high priest said, verse 61, "Are you Christ, the blessed, the Son of the blessed?" And Jesus answered, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting in the right hand of the power and coming from the clouds of heaven." And this is when the high priest, verse 63, tore his clothes. And as was pointed out, that this was labeled to him as an act of blasphemy, but technically he did not commit blasphemy. And Marty showed a little bit of the different variants of the different theories at the time, what the people of Judah, the people of the Jews were looking for. And I believe Christ was very technically made sure he was accurate. But even though he did not technically commit blasphemy, he was accused of it. They were going to use what he said to make their case. They wanted to make their case. And so again, they condemned him to be deserving of death. They said, "Your own words condemn you." Technically it wasn't true, but they had their case. They were going to make a case. They were going to find a way to make a case. They were going to use legal loopholes to make a case Sound familiar? Because that's what human nature is. That's what human nature does. Verse 65, they began to spit on him and blindfold him and say, "No, who hit you? Who was the one who hit you, magic man? Who was the one who hit you, special one? Who hit you?" And then Peter was in the courtyard warming his hands. This one gal came up and said, verse 67, "You were with Jesus of Nazareth." He said, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're saying." And he went on the porch and a rooster crowed. And the servant girls saw him again and said, "This is one of them." He said, "No, no, no, no." And a little later, one stood by him and said, "Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean, because your speech reveals you. You talk like a Galilean. You have the accent of a Galilean. You have the dialect of a Galilean. You're a Galilean. You're one of them." Verse 71, he began to curse and swear and said, "I don't know what this man's talking about." And then the second time the rooster crowed, and Peter remembered what was said, and then he wept bitterly. Well, that's the part I was trying to accomplish completely, and I went through that last part rather quickly. That's the part I was trying to accomplish by Wednesday night before the memorial, because that's the events of that night, the night he was betrayed. Now we come into this day. Immediately in the morning, now we read, I'm staying in Mark just for continuity, but mixing them together, seeing them together, comparing them together gives a fuller picture. But now we're coming to the point of on into the daylight portion, which is today. So the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council, and they bound him, and they led him away to Pilate. Then Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews? Are you the king of the Jews?" And I like the way he answered it. He says, "It is as you say." He never acknowledged it, he never confirmed it, but he let them go on with their accusation. By the way, I was looking at different videos to play today. I was looking at different videos I was going to play, and I've chosen what we're going to do is sing hymns at the end of my presentation. We're going to sing some hymns. And the reason I didn't choose some of there was one video that I sent around to many of you via text that I like it, and I listened to it. I really enjoy it, and some of you did too. But I'll tell you why I didn't play it today. I firmly believe that we should have conviction and compassion. And I know people say, well, we as people shouldn't worry about what other people think. Well, 1 Corinthians 8 and 1 Corinthians 10 talks about not offending our brother. And this video, which I listened to 5 times this morning, I really love the video, was thinking about playing it, is a song and visuals. I'll tell you the reason why, and I think if I tell you the reason why, you'll understand about me, and maybe you'll take a point for yourself. There's three ways the video could be offensive, okay? The video, first of all, pictures an actor looking like Jesus Christ. And while that's not offensive to me, I do know there are individuals in the body of Christ who would feel that that violates one of the 10 Commandments to have an actor picture Jesus Christ. The second one was, in the video, it pictures him on a cross. And while that image is not offensive to me, I prefer the stake, the tree. However, I'm not bugged out by the picture of a cross. I know that could be offensive to some people. And then thirdly, it does show him battered and bruised. And, I thought, well, people may not want to see that image. So those were 3 reasons why I chose not to play the video. Now, someone can say, "What? You sent me a link to that video." Yes, but when I sent the link to the video, you could start listening to it. If you didn't like it, stop the link. You could delete the link. You never have to look at the link. If I had done it, I would have announced to our people on the internet, "This is going to happen. If you're not interested, stop watching." And I suppose I could have said, if you're not interested, you could have walked out quietly over to the classroom. But I thought, I'm not even going to try to spend time to look at our differences on that. Why am I explaining that? Let me tell you why I'm explaining that. Because while we want to be people of conviction, we really don't want to be offensive to people. And so while that video, which really is nice to me, and I gave it so it could be nice to you privately, in this public setting in the hall and this public setting on the internet, I chose not to do it today. Again, I'm not telling you what you have to do. I'm letting you know a little bit about me, and maybe there's something you can consider on that. I'll probably listen to the video again tonight. I really love the video. It's really something that's valuable to me. But just because something's valuable to me doesn't make it valuable to you. I also thought about, then I was looking for other videos this morning. Are there other videos that could do the purpose without violating those three issues? And I couldn't quite come up with one. I couldn't come up with one that I thought would work for this public setting. But one thing that was obvious that came up again, I actually saw a man giving kind of a mini sermonette. And he was talking about how Pilate called him the King of the Jews. And of course, you know, when you read the story, they didn't like that. They didn't like that. They didn't want him to be called that. And you might remember they approached him to say, we don't want that. Can you change that title? He said, I said what I said. I'm sticking by what I said. So there are a lot of good details that can be brought out, and again, that were brought out in the interactive study. But he did not. Pilate asked him, are you the King of the Jews? And his answer was, it's as you say. It's as you say. In other words, I'm not going to argue with you about it. Well, the chief priests accused him of many things, and he answered nothing. And Pilate asked him again, do you answer nothing? Do you see what they're testifying against you? And Jesus still answered nothing, and Pilate marveled at that. He just kept quiet. You're not defending yourself. You're not antagonistic. You're not angry. You're just dealing with it. At the feast, it was a custom to release a prisoner to whom they requested, Barabbas, which was brought out again, son of the father, which means that. So it was, again, Marty brought out that the man that they asked for his release was the son of the father, as they wanted to kill the true son of the true father, which is actually a really interesting point too. But anyway, again, they let him go, and I got to move on here. They wanted him crucified. So verse 15, Pilate, wanting to gratify the crowd, released Barabbas to them, and he delivered Jesus after he had scourged him to be crucified. The soldiers then had the whole garrison come together, the whole garrison, and they wanted to get his clothing. And they thought about ripping up his clothing, but they casted lots. Some people say they used dice. But they casted lots anyway to let the winner get the good quality of clothes instead of ripping it asunder. Again, verse 19, they struck him on the head and spat on him, bowing the knee, mocking him. They were mocking him. And they took off his purple, and they put his own clothes on him. They led him away to crucify him. Simon was an individual who would help bear the cross. And here was Simon, he's bearing the cross. And I'll mention something I mentioned at many funerals and committal services. And I know you'll hear it. We say it a lot of times. I want to keep saying it. Jesus said, if you're not willing to carry your cross, you can't be a disciple. And that is so true. I believe he said it. But yet he did not carry his own cross. And I know that atheists have heyday with that. They like to make fun of that. I see it wonderfully. That yes, you and I are willing to carry our own cross, but sometimes we help other people carry their cross. And that's a good thing. Just like his whole death helps us carry our cross. And so I want to compliment you as a congregation, as a people, that all the times you reach out to help people, you help carry their cross. That's a good thing. So help carry the cross of your family, help carry the cross of your spouse, help carry the cross of your friends. Sometimes you can help carry the cross of a stranger. Someone's broken down on the road. If it's a wise thing for you to do, as you analyze the situation, you can help people carry their cross. Let me also mention something else. Allow others to help carry your cross. Sometimes we don't want to have too much pride to think, I can do this by myself. I don't need anybody's help. When someone offers you, has a genuine heart to help you, let them help you. Help others. Pay things forward. Let people help you out. The way God's system works is a beautiful system that, again, I think it's amazing that he was so beaten up and so battered that he was not effectively carrying his cross. And so thereby, this Simon was pulled on by the soldiers to make sure they would do it for him. Then they gave him wine to drink. But at this point, he did not take it. Here's where they divided, verse 24, they divided his garments by casting lots. Now in the third hour, he was crucified. And again, the title of the study, if I didn't mention it clearly, was Our Passover Lamb Died at 3 p.m. That's the title of the study, by the way. Sorry I didn't mention it at the beginning. The Passover Lamb died at 3 p.m. Again, we picture it now. We're not Jerusalem time, but according to the schedule we had, last night we went through the symbols. We went through the meaning of the symbols. We went through the activities that happened that night. We're quickly going through the activities that happened today. And he died at 3 p.m. So again, at verse 25, it was 9 o'clock. They began the crucifixion at 9 o'clock. They called him the accusation, the king of the Jews. Verse 27, there were two robbers there, one on the right, one on the left. So he was numbered with the transgressors, as was prophesied in the book of Isaiah, I believe. Verse 29, they blasphemed him, wagging their head, taunting him about the comment he made back in John 2 about 3 days and 3 nights. Verse 29, you who destroyed the temple and built it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross. Verse 31, the chief priests mocked him. You saved others, but you can't even save yourself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, descend now from the cross. Then we'll believe. We'll believe you then. Come on. Again, taunting. Do not let people manipulate you. I mean, I guess he could have called upon the Father to do whatever, but he was going to follow the purpose and not let people manipulate him. Do not let people manipulate your religious ideas. Do not let people say, you have to do this or you're not really a Christian. You have to do what we say. This is the litmus test. Be really wary of litmus tests, that man-made litmus test. I mean, God has expectations, and understand what God's expectations are. Whenever someone comes and says, again, I have friends who keep a different calendar. I have friends who are going to be keeping these feast days a month from now. I love them. I support their freedom to do so. I support their right to do so. But see, my friends don't approach me and say, you have to do it the way I do it. Then we wouldn't be friends, really. That we wouldn't have a relationship. I have people who say the sacred names differently than I do. I have people who do their Sabbath behavior slightly different than mine. And I love to give people freedom, sincere, convicted freedom to do what they do. But what I love is they don't try to cram their religion down my throat. And I really have an aversion to people who set up litmus tests like, Dave, you have to do it my way, or you're not a Christian. You're not acceptable. Well, I say I have an aversion, I just don't listen to it. That does not inspire me, that does not motivate me, and actually it doesn't even make me feel mad anymore. It's just a matter of, well, you're going to have your opinion, I'm going to follow my conviction, and I want to have compassion to you as you follow yours. Now, that doesn't mean friends can't give advice to each other, but even then we have to be wise in how we do it. But again, be careful of litmus tests. You have to do it my way. Just please be really careful of that. Verse 33, then the 6th hour, darkness from 6th hour to the 9th hour, from noon to 3, there was darkness. Jerry Thompson brought up we had an interesting discussion today. He said, how do you know it was really 3 o'clock when he died? And I said, oh yeah, it was dark, yeah. Because again, they didn't have watches. They didn't have electronic clocks. So the sundial wouldn't be working as well. We're just having fun with each other talking. But it was dark from noon till 3. And then in the 9th at 3 o'clock, that's when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then some who stood by, is he calling for Elijah? And then they ran and filled the sponge of sour wine. The first time he did not take the sedative. This time he did take the sedative. And verse 37, he cried out with a loud voice and breathed his last breath. The veil of the temple was torn in two. The centurion who saw it, his conclusion was, verse 39, truly this man was the Son of God. I went through this a lot faster than I intended. I will encourage you, I do have an article I wrote this week called The Passover Lamb Died at 3 p.m. that goes through the scriptures we talked about. I do have an article this week entitled 3 Days and 3 Nights. I do find it interesting that sometimes what I believe is true material from the Bible is seen by the majority of people in the world. And then occasionally there's something you believe that's not seen. And I will say this, that my view of 3 days and 3 nights, which is probably your view, is so different than the common view. When I was looking at any videos to show, the timing that they had of the last week, the 8 days, some say the 7 days, the timing is so different than what I believe. And by the way, I believe what the Church of God has taught through the years. I still believe that. I believe the 3 days and 3 nights. I believe that the crucifixion was on a Wednesday, that the high day was on a Thursday, and I understand. Let's take a quick peek at John 19. Again, this is what I still believe, even though the vast majority of professing Christians do not believe it. John 19, let's see, verse 31. The reason why, again, you try to understand why people believe what they do. You try to understand why people have the conclusions they have. That's a good thing to do. So they say that preparation day was Friday before the Sabbath. Well, John 19, verse 31, says, therefore, because it was the preparation day, that the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath. But the parenthesis says, for that Sabbath was a high day. And what the Church of God has taught, which is what I still believe, that it was an annual day was on Thursday. And so thereby, he was crucified, I believe, was crucified on a Wednesday. And it is true then they had to get the body down. They had to get the body down because a Sabbath day was approaching. But it's really amazing. So either a few of us who believe like you and I believe, we're out of step and we're wrong, or there's just a whole lot of people in the world who just are wrong about that. And of course, I'm a man of conviction, just like your people of conviction. I don't want to condemn people for believing a different thing. But as I keep researching, and I wrote the article, I still believe, as we taught before, that he was crucified on Wednesday, put in the ground quickly, and thereby then there was an annual Sabbath day and then also a weekly Sabbath day, as explained in, I think it's Luke 23. But so again, yesterday pictured the night he was betrayed. We had the symbols. We did the foot washing, we did the bread and the wine. Now in the morning, we started looking at these events, and we did it so quickly today. I apologize. For those at the Interactive, that you got an extra dose from Mr. Cobb, which I appreciate it. But now we come to the point where he, in the picture of it, in the time sequence, he actually dies at 3 o'clock. Our Passover lamb died at 3 o'clock because he is our Passover lamb.